Good afternoon, everybody. This is the March 27th, actually isn't it the 28th? 27th Board of County Commissioners meeting, regular meeting. Commissioner Postman is out of the country right now on a family business trip, and I will be filling in as chair for him today. So are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
I do not have any.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any public comments about any items that are not on the agenda today? Okay, please come forward and state your name for the record.
Hi, gang. Welcome to the new county commissioners. My name is Mike Maple. I live down the road in Aspen. I have about 4 things that I wanted to briefly touch base with you on since I, managed to make it here after 3 weeks of trying. The first one is the roundabout. I am well aware that CDOT is primarily responsible for the condition of the roundabout, but it's in your county and probably in our city as well. And, the condition of the roundabout this winter was obviously horrible. But in my opinion, it's been horrible for a decade or more. And the issue, quite simply is asphalt is not a very good surface for a roundabout, particularly a roundabout that has this much activity. And while it may be primarily CDOT's responsibility to maintain that, as a resident of Aspen and Pitt County in the state of Colorado, I really look to my government. I don't care who it is. Let's have appropriate infrastructure for the entrance to our community, and the solution for this is quite simply, I believe, concrete. Last summer, I recall the roundabout was in lousy shape. And the resurfacing of the roundabout kept getting pushed back because there was events and it's high summer and blah, blah, blah. And that's, those were all good and rational things to be trying to schedule the resurfacing of the roundabout around. But the roundabout has to be resurfaced every year. And, it's crazy to have a roadway that is in that poor of condition year after year after year, and B, to be impacting the citizens and visitors in the community every single year to try and schedule a couple of days or whatever it is of chaos to resurface it. So I'm here to ask you to be attentive to this matter and to use your influence as well as potentially our tax dollars to get a solution to this sooner than later. I understand CDOT is strapped. I understand it's their responsibility, but as a taxpayer, I'm looking to the city, the county, and the state, and I've carried the same message to City Hall, made the exact same request. So I ask you to work with them to sort this out. Next up, on the, I may have the name of the project wrong, but it was in the paper yesterday or today, the Phillips Trailer Park or whatever it is that the county recently purchased. I was very excited to see that you all are considering an increase to the number of units that is currently there, and I would like to wholeheartedly encourage you to do that. Too often, as I look at both city and county solutions for affordable housing, there is a tremendous reticence to effectively utilizing our land and applying density to our housing problem. And we're not manufacturing any more land, and the pieces of land that can be dedicated to some sort of affordable housing or attainable housing or whatever is it's not increasing, it's decreasing. And so I ask you, whenever there's an opportunity to do more attainable affordable housing than less, you should be doing more. To use the city of Aspen as an example, their recent project on Castle Creek Road, that there was a great deal of debate about whether there ought to be a third story and more units or less units. I understand that there's always impacts, but this community, year in and year out, says that affordable housing is the biggest issue, and there's trade-offs. Density density comes at a cost, but, looking at, in the case of Castle Creek at, some height issue, a 3-foot height difference versus having 3 more units and utilizing, the taxpayers' affordable housing dollars much more efficiently, is crazy, absolutely crazy. So thank you for looking at increasing density at Phillips, and I encourage you to push the envelope and do as much as can reasonably be accomplished on that site. Oh, sorry about that.
So one question, in your opinion on the roundabout, do you think that just doing a concrete finish on it would be sufficient, or do you think there should be a reconfiguration of the roundabout, making it a different size or something?
I'm not an engineer, so I don't pretend to have an opinion on it. As it happens, I had the joy, I'll use that euphemistically, of directing the construction of 2 roundabouts in Glenwood Springs, the exit 114 roundabouts. My company had the joy of shelling out $4.5 million for that project. So I did spend a lot of time on roundabouts, but I don't claim to be an expert by any stretch of the imagination. If there's a way to make it better, should we make it better at the same time we're providing a better surface? Yeah, we should. But here again, as I look around the region and the state, more often than not, roundabouts are concrete, and it doesn't take an engineer to see why that is. Going around in a circle creates very different forces on asphalt than going in a straight line does. So, thank you.
Okay. Thanks for your comments.
He has one more.
You have one more item.
Actually, I have 2 more. The next item is McLean Flats Road and the construction activity that's taking place this year. I don't pretend to know much about it. I understand it's for a gas line, et cetera, et cetera. What I do know is that according to what I read in the paper, it's going to impact one of 2 access points to the county seat and the city for the better part of 6 months. To me, that's crazy. This is a disruption that maybe it's being made for the benefit of the community, but it's really mostly being made for the benefit of a utility provider. And that utility provider should be pressed much harder to get that project done in a much shorter time period and lessen the impact to our community. A 6-month or a 5-month impact to one of our 2 access points is insane, in my opinion. And then my last point, also timely in today's paper, is about Sheriff DeSalvo's interest in limiting or eliminating fireworks. I don't pretend to understand exactly what he's requesting, but I would say as a member of this community that we are a tourist-based and a recreation and entertainment-based community, and fireworks are important and iconic. And so, while I certainly support the idea of carefully managing the fire hazards, as well as I would say that we've probably had too many annual fireworks shows in this community in some recent years. Winter School, 4th of July, Ideas Festival. Seems like a few years ago some private person paid for a fireworks show. I think that's kind of over the top. But I do fully support if fire conditions are reasonably, emphasis on reasonably, allow it to continue to celebrate this terrific and piece of our heritage and our community, and that's have fireworks displays when they're appropriate. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for your comments. Are there any other public comments? Lee?
My name is Lee Mulcahy, and I'm very grateful to report to you that I just got back from Kenya, and we did 2 water wells, one at the hand pump has a hand pump in the community. He just goes up and pumps it out, and then another to a tower. We did 2 computer labs at a primary school and a secondary school, a high school for girls, and did water harvesting at a church. We're taking volunteers next year, so if any of you guys want to go, it is a wonderful experience, and I'm so grateful to my father who left this community and left our family with the legacy of helping other people in Kenya. The reason I'm here, I think you know, but I'll reiterate. I feel, and my family strongly feels, that our constitutional rights to due process are being egregiously violated by your APSHA, your baby, that's your creation. And Board Hauenstein on City Council said, and I'll read it, this is in the Aspen Daily News, said APSHA is trying to take away the home Mulcahy built on his own blood equity. I really think it would be an injustice to this town and the eclectic collection of human beings here to kick Lee out of a home that he has proudly earned and certainly built. Yeah, 2 days ago, and Monday in City Council, and I brought this, but I think it's, you know, I have the recording of Bert. Would you like me to play it or just kind of paraphrase him?
Just paraphrase.
Okay. So Bert said that APSHA and the city are hiding behind procedural deadlines over procedural matters over a missed deadline. And he encouraged the council, and remember those are only 2 votes and I need 3, to look at the substance of the matter, and that is, should an artist count as employment in Pitkin County? And I believe it should. And this town was built around the arts. It was built around artists, and I just think it'd be a crying shame to railroad an artist out of town, because, guys, I'm very, very grateful to my mom. She has a backbone of steel, and you know, we are not going to be driven out of this town. I'll go to jail. And I'll stay there. You know, in Africa, Nelson Mandela was in jail decades because of injustice. And this is, frankly, this is an unjust situation. A freedom of a society is often measured not by how a town treats its compliant, obedient citizens, but how the society treats its dissidents, its artists. I want to go into it in detail, but you've seen me bring my paper up. This whole thing is situated on a premature notice of violation. APSHA does not even play by their own rules. They don't even play by the court's rules. You know, you have in your Jeanette, thank you so much for scanning that into your packet, but you have 40 pages detailed of egregious constitutional violations. And the judge, and I'd like to remind you that he was an assistant county, your assistant county attorney. And Richard, I don't know how much a county attorney makes. It's public record, but I would say it's less than $150,000.
Probably there.
The assistant county attorney, Chris Selden, was admitted in court that he was a member of the Lester Crown Society of Fellows for over a decade. The minimum contribution is $2,500. Now, that is a significant investment, and what the Lester Crown Society of Fellows at the Aspen Institute promise is unparalleled access. And, you know, in our court system these days, the judge has a great deal of discretion. He does not have to recuse himself. And that is unfortunate, because after we wrote 40 pages, and you have that information, the judge wrote about 1.5 pages and said, you know, he didn't even mention the notice of violation. That was premature, which is illegal. He didn't even mention or explain why he didn't have a case management conference, which was ordered within 42 days of APSHA suing us. And I want to remind you guys, this is so important. When I took my records in after I came back from Kenya in October of 2015, the deputy director marched out and said, "We are not going to look at this. We have decided to sue you." So, you know, we can waste a lot more time and we can waste a lot more appeals, but until we open the books and look at the damning evidence, and all I'm asking for you guys, all I'm asking is just to put our situation, our family situation on the public agenda, just for 15 minutes. I'm just asking for 15 minutes of your time. And it's difficult to get past the bureaucracy to get on the agenda. But if there's support from my neighbor Kelly and from Steve and from Patty, my family would be honored. And we won't take much of your time, but this is something that should be looked at.
Okay. Thank you for your comments, Lee, and we always listen carefully to you, and we'll take your comments under consideration.
I appreciate that, Steve. You knew my father. I followed the protocol. I emailed Charlotte to be asked to be put on the agenda.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
thank you.
I appreciate your time.
Glad you're home safely.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments? Everybody else is on the agenda, so are there any commissioner comments?
That makes them, as everybody probably realized, today was gorgeous outside. So I hope everybody's out there enjoying the day. And it's my understanding that tomorrow should be gorgeous and we'll get snow again on Friday. So please remember, though it is spring, we still have winter that comes and goes. So be careful out there, but enjoy. And hopefully we'll get into our gardens much sooner than later. And I appreciate the board's patience with my being gone. I am back and I'm definitely back at work and working hard. So thank you. Enjoy the spring.
Kelly? It is springtime, and the skunks are already out up at our house, even though there's about 4 feet of snow still. The bears will be out soon if they aren't already, and they are going to be looking for food, even though there isn't a whole lot to eat with so much snow on the ground. And so I'm just giving a little warning to people to start thinking in terms of keeping bears from getting into their trash, into their bird feeders, into your dog and cat food and those sorts of things, because it will happen sooner than later. And the bears are going to get out, and there's not going to be a whole lot to eat right away, so they might be a nuisance right away.
As will the skunks.
The skunks have really been a nuisance in our personal family life because our little dog has gotten sprayed twice already. All right, thank you. Okay, moving on to our consent items, single reading. We have the minutes of the regular meeting of March 13th, and we have a resolution approving an abatement petition for refund of property taxes submitted by NZC Company LLC.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, it's moved and seconded to approve. Is there any discussion? And I'll note that on the abatement petition, there was a mistake made, like a clerical mistake was made, and this is just really correcting that mistake, and it looks like it's totally a fair and obvious thing to do to approve this abatement. And also, because it's a matter of over $10,000, that's why it's coming to the commissioners to be approved.
Correct.
So, all in favor of approving those two items on the consent?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Those both are approved. Thank you, Larry, for coming in.
Thanks, Larry.
Moving on to our individual consideration items. These are all first readings set for public hearing on April 10th. The first one is a resolution approving an IGA with the town of Basalt for use tax collection. And Ann Driggers is here from our Finance Department. Ann?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I have 2 items here, and they're both very similar, so I guess I can present them together, and then you would take action individually. But to give you a little bit of background, in 1993, as you know, the electorate approved a half-cent use tax on construction materials that were purchased outside of Pitkin County. So when contractors or residents were building and they imported materials, they're required to pay use tax. It is typically collected at the point of a permit being issued, and the deposit is calculated as the half-cent on 50% of the cost of construction, which is a national standard that is used, thinking that about 50% of the construction cost would be for construction materials. So that deposit is collected up front, usually. About, I think, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, Pitkin County Finance Department actually had a person that was dedicated specifically to use tax collection and audit. That person passed and was not replaced. And so it has fallen onto other staff within the finance department to do this with a little bit of help from the city of Aspen. We have reached out to the town of Basalt and the town of Snowmass Village to help us also. And they have agreed to collect the deposits when they issue the building permits. I spoke with both the town managers and the finance departments and the ComDev departments for each, and they're both, everybody was extremely helpful. I think the municipalities agreed that it would benefit their customer service as well, because in the past, they would issue the building permits, they would collect checks for their building fees, rent fees, all the other things that they collect money for. And then finance would have to say, can you give us a list of your recent permits issued? And then we would send letters saying, you owe us this amount of money. And the permit holders would be like, wait, hang on a second, I thought I'd already paid all my fees. So I think it makes for a better customer experience, and the town managers agreed with that. So they were very amenable to us putting together this process that will make, I think, it more, obviously, a little more efficient for us. So that's the sort of move behind all of this. It has actually been happening with the town of Snowmass Village for about the last 18 months. And I reached out to Basalt just recently, and so they have agreed to start doing it once the IGA is in place. So we're sort of memorializing what's already been happening with Snowmass and starting new with Basalt. And so that's kind of it in a nutshell.
So we've been doing this with City of Aspen for some time. Do we have an IGA with them?
We do,
Okay, just
yes.
to make sure we're playing level field.
Correct. And with each of the municipalities, it's been a little bit different on how it happens. And with the town of Snowmass, they actually, with the city of Aspen, they actually walk the checks because they're close by over to the treasurer and put them in. With Snowmass Village, it used to be that they would put them in the mail, and then within the first month I got here, there was quite a lot of money that took months to get here with the Basalt move and everything. And so we're like, no, we can do this a little better. And so the process that we're setting up with Snowmass and Basalt is that they will actually deposit it in their own bank accounts, and then they will write us a check every quarter. So we've had to work with their finance departments as well as their ComDev, who've actually been collecting the permits, or the money, I should say.
Kelly?
Are the municipalities requesting any fee for this? Are the municipalities requesting any fee for this service on our behalf?
No. And, you know, ultimately they benefit from it because the use tax is all put into the Sales and Use Tax Fund, which is administered by the EOTC, of which they're all part of. And we are charged to the Sales and Use Tax Fund from the Finance Department. We believe will lessen a little bit, which will mean there's more money for them to dole out on the projects that they see fit. So it's about $1.2 million a year, so it's a substantial amount of money. And since 1993, we've collected over $35 million for EOTC projects.
And I have a question on the logistics of how this happens, because the person, it says they make a deposit,
Correct.
then they get the building permit, they build the house, but then the use tax is paid on the materials of the house. So then
Right.
do they either get a rebate from the
They
county, or they have to pay more depending on how much they actually spend?
Absolutely. Yes. So the homeowner or contractor is required, once they receive their CO, to submit a use tax reconciliation to us, and either requesting a refund or they have to pay more, and they have to present quite a lot of information. I actually should have brought down like a recent reconciliation. It's like this thick, a copy of every single invoice showing what they bought locally and what they bought outside. And typically, we're issuing refunds because the cost of labor in construction is much higher here than it is in other places, and we're using this national standard of 50% of the total cost being construction materials. It usually ends up being less, so they often get a refund. But we in finance, actually Valerie Waldstrom in finance, it's her job to go through all of these reconciliations as they're provided by the contractors, and then also follow up for those that don't provide them. So once a CO is issued, we request a list of all of those COs that have been issued from each of the municipalities, and then follow up with the contractors if they haven't submitted a reconciliation.
Okay,
So a
then
lot of
it's-
work.
is
There
it-
was a reason why there was one person dedicated to all of this
So
before.
is it our finance department that does the follow-up and makes the refunds,
Yes. Yep.
and not the town of Basalt or the town of Snowmass?
No,
Village?
because they're actually pass the money over to us at the beginning of the process.
Mm-hmm.
So the refunds would just come directly out of the Sales and Use Tax Fund.
Okay.
And also, thank you to Jeanette. She really helped me corral all of the attorneys for each of the municipalities, who were also great too, but she had all the contacts.
All right, are there any further questions? And I would entertain a motion. We need actually two separate motions. The first would be for a resolution approving the IGA with the town of Basalt for use tax
So
collection.
moved.
Okay, we have a
I'll second.
motion and a second by Kelly. Any further discussion?
I'll just note that second reading is scheduled for April 10th.
Yes.
That's right.
And public hearing.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 And I'll make a motion approving the IGA between the Board of Commissioners and the town of Snowmass Village for use tax collection. This one also has a second reading and public hearing on April the 10th.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the resolution for an IGA with the town of Snowmass Village. Is there any further discussion on this one? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you
Thank you,
very
Ann.
much,
Thank
Ann,
you.
and we'll see you on, we'll probably
April
see you
10th.
before then, but on April 10th. Coming up next, we have a resolution amending, amending an IGA between the Board of County Commissioners and Eagle County for public health planning services. And we have obviously have a stand-in for Jordana Sabella.
Good afternoon, Kurt Dahl, Pickens County Public Health. I'm the Environmental Health Manager. Jordana asked me to represent today for Public Health. She is at a mental health conference and was not able to attend. So this is a first reading for a resolution to amend our IGA with Eagle County. Under that IGA, we're providing public health planning services to the Mid-Valley, that western portion of Eagle County that's in the Roaring Fork Valley. And in return, we can receive revenue not to exceed $51,500. So we invoice on a monthly basis for staff time, vehicle expenditures, and any other expenditures associated with the our representing. What we end up doing is, as part of our representation with Pickens County at local meetings, we also then are able to represent Mid-Valley people as well, which I think is really a great piece since we have that commonality between us. We also have a lot of local non-government organizations or nonprofits that we partner with, and we're able then to facilitate those partnerships and connect those folks that live in Western Eagle County as well with public health services. So this IGA would be to amend our current one that was brought to you at the end of 2017. It would amend it through the end of this year. And I believe there are no other terms or changes.
George?
Kurt, do you recall, we had another partnership with Eagle County that they dissolved about a year ago. I forget if it was dealing with one of the human services.
I vaguely do, although I don't know the relationship between these.
It was with NAN and
It was with NAN.
benefits provision out of the state.
Because they were concerned about the cost on their end, so
Was it
I think this is.
workforce? Does that make sense?
What?
No, it was,
Yeah, I mean, I think this is great, but, and this goes till the end of this year, and then we would have to revisit this
Right.
for 2020. So.
Right, and obviously I'm a stand-in for Jordana, but she didn't indicate to me any reason to think that this would be the last that we would do that. I would have expected that, if she was thinking that we would end this relationship, obviously I can't speak absolutely for her, but
Well, this is just a first reading, so maybe
First reading.
just pose that question to Jordana
I can.
when she comes back for a second.
I can, and I can let Karen know too, and they can
That'd be
talk with
great.
Nan about the
All right, thanks.
piece, yeah.
question? So the amendment is just the fact that we're extending it?
Correct.
There's nothing else that was amended in the document?
Correct.
And I just have to ask, why, you might not know the answer to this. Why is it coming in so late when the first agreement expired on the 31st of December 2018?
I do not know that.
Okay.
I do not.
We can ask her that on the second reading.
Okay, I'll let her know that you look for that answer too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd like an answer to that. Sometimes we have to do an emergency ordinance if that's,
And this
Sure.
Or
one might
emergency
be a matter
resolution.
of that somebody can sign for it, but they just decided to follow up with technically an amended agreement, extending it to December 31st, 2019. So,
Okay.
okay.
I have a question. Can you just illustrate one or two types of services that we're providing for Eagle?
Sure. So we have a community health assessment and a community health plan that's regional. And so as part of that, when we're looking at making regional decisions, we as Pickens County Public Health then also get to include that decision-making and thinking about Western Eagle County. We also partner with the several coalitions around public health. And we represent then that portion of Eagle County in the Roaring Fork Valley when we're at these meetings, both local and regional.
Okay.
Is that
That helps.
helps? Okay.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to approve this.
I'll move to approve.
So this is,
Set for
And
public
is there-
hearing and second reading on April the 10th.
okay.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve. Is there any further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Kurt.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you.
Next, we have an emergency ordinance prohibiting both the consumption of alcohol and marijuana on unlicensed public premises for the duration of the Opry Festival on Buttermilk Mountain.
Thank
We
you,
have
Steve.
Jeanette here to talk about this.
Jeanette Jones, Manager's Office, and that's correct. What we have before you on the table today is an emergency ordinance prohibiting both the consumption of alcohol and marijuana on unlicensed premises during the Après Ski Festival that's going to be held at the base of Buttermilk Mountain. At a special meeting on March 12th, the board asked us to come back with this ordinance, and Joe was going to be here today. I think he's had something come up, so I'm sitting in for him. This mirrors the X Games ordinance that you all approved in January, and it pretty much is the same ordinance, just a different event. So if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Patty?
So,
Or get them to Joe.
how does this apply to the intercept lot? Because during the X Games, we also extend some kind of authority for enforcement issues at the intercept lot.
And that's in here.
That's a part of it
Too,
too? Okay. I just, because it just said the
Yeah.
premises of the event, just wanted
Yeah.
to make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we have second reading, confirmatory reading on the
April 10th.
10th.
Kelly?
I'll just note that there is, on your definitions, B, we missed the P in cup.
Okay,
So we can just correct that.
we'll fix that.
Thank you.
So Jeanette, just to clarify, the licensed premise would actually be just the area at Buttermilk where someone would be allowed to have an open container of alcohol, and they would not be able to use marijuana in that area. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then when they get to the intercept lot, that is not part of the licensed premises. That is back in the public again.
That's correct.
Yeah.
The licensed premises is actually an optional premises for Bumps Restaurant. And those boundaries are what have to be adhered to as far as consumption of alcohol.
Okay.
Can I go back?
Patty?
When you said that the intercept lot, it's not specifically referred to, it's just said public highway, parking lot, building, park, open. Okay, so that's why.
Correct.
I didn't know, because I thought in the X Games, we specifically designated the intercept lot because it was key to the event, so I understand. Thanks.
So,
Sorry, I'm a little more confused than I was. My understanding was that the licensed premises was the fenced area within Buttermilk, and that was a separate vendor than Bumps, which is kind of their standard operating restaurant.
No, it's an optional premises from Bumps. Oh, are you talking, there's another, what is it, Home Team Barbecue? That would be part of it too, and they're also licensed, so they can use that fenced area. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay,
So
okay.
someone could travel from the fenced area of the concert to Bumps and to
They-
Home Team.
They're bumped right together.
Okay.
Bumps
Bumped
and
right
bumped.
together.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're adjoining. Is that probably a
That
better word for it, Kelly?
They
I like
each have a
bumped.
liquor license.
And they have a liquor license.
okay, then I have a technical question. This is an emergency ordinance, and then we will reconfirm it on the meeting on April 10th. Is that the
That's
process we'll
correct.
follow? That's correct. Okay. And that will be, at that point, a public hearing also.
Correct.
Okay.
Means it technically takes effect today if we pass it, because
Yeah,
of the time frame
and that's
of the
just
event.
reconfirming the emergency ordinance. So I would entertain a motion to approve the emergency ordinance prohibiting both the consumption of alcohol and marijuana on unlicensed public premises for the duration of the Opry Festival on Buttermilk Mountain.
I'll move.
I have a
I'll
motion
second.
and a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jeanette. And the last item on our first readings is a resolution approving a grant application to the Colorado Department of Housing to support the Basalt Vista housing project, and if awarded, authorizing acceptance of the grant. And Phyllis, Take it
Okay.
away.
Phyllis Mattice, Deputy County Manager. This grant application requires board action in order to even apply. So that's why we're here, and in the agenda item summary, I identified it would be up to $500,000. Since I wrote that in today, we now have a figure of $339,000 is what the actual grant application is going to be for. It's allowable for fees. Now, the town of Basalt did waive, I think it's $420,000 in fees, but these are some additional fees that are there. The only units that can qualify for this are units that are below 80% AMI, which represents about 50% of the units at Basalt Vista. So it's kind of a little chunk. We are writing as the grant applicant, but would subgrant it to Basalt. They're looking for ways to close their exposure on their expenses to build this. It's almost $1.9 million of a gap of building all of the units that they are trying to fundraise for. So we would be the applicant. We would then, if we're awarded, then pass through the funds to Habitat or the Roaring Fork Valley, of which then you'd also see a supplemental come to accept the money and to spend the money. So that's part of our process. We're still working through it. On April 10th, which is your second reading, you'll have the completed application as part of your packet in order for us to be able to submit it into that April deadline. Habitat has hired a grant writer, and so she is putting it all together, which has been a great learning experience for us on a community development block grant, because she's been walking us through how to make that application. And if we ever want to apply for that type of a grant in the future, we'll have a template of a completed grant application. So that's been a real benefit. This is through DOLA's Department of Housing, and then the Federal Community Development Block Grant. So this is a new one for us to learn about. And fees are, there's a lot of fees involved when you're doing it. So this is sewer tap fees, fire department fees, building review fees. So it's some of those fees that are looking to be covered through this grant.
George?
So Phyllis, right now, is it Habitat's role and responsibility to be paying these fees, and then we would reimburse them?
Right, so this
grant.
Right. This is all related to the vertical construction. Pickens County contributed to the horizontal and all the infrastructure. So after the houses are paid for, there's still that $1.8 million gap between the affordable rate of the purchase prices and the actual expense to build them.
Okay, thanks.
So, yeah, Habitat's paying for these fees through their accounting now.
Okay.
Okay. Phyllis, is this one something that, I mean, a lot of times Pickens County wouldn't qualify on say, a housing thing because we're too wealthy of a county, and they tend to give their grants to projects that are for lower income people. But then this project is for the lower income of people,
Right,
at least
that's-
for 50% of the housing. And is that the reason why we qualify for this?
Correct. The funding has to be for housing that's for 80% AMI and below. So if it was a Pickens County alone project and we were applying for it, we would be eligible too if we met the affordability requirement for the people that are in the housing.
Okay. That's good to know.
And this is for sale housing. So the application has a whole bunch of criteria that you have to meet depending on the project that you're doing.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
I will move and set for a second reading and public hearing on April the 10th. Thanks, Phyllis.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Phyllis.
Exciting.
44. Let's move on to the individual consideration items, public hearing, second readings. The first one, and Connie is here, a resolution approving first quarter budget supplemental requests. Thank
Good
you, Connie.
afternoon. Connie Baker, Picken County Budget Director. And we're here for second reading and public hearing of the first quarter supplemental requests. The board has had a work session on these requests with staff there to present them all and explain them and answer questions. And the open space requests went through a joint meeting of the Picken County Commissioners and the Open Space and Trails Board. So you should be familiar with them. I will just briefly mention each one and the totals for the resolution. The first request is from the Clerk and Recorder's Office. It's for a contract to do imaging, scanning. They've been working on putting all of their documents in digital form, and this is just another piece of that project, going back and trying to get everything in electronic format. It's $7,300. This does not come out of the general fund. The clerk has a committed fund balance that is specifically for e-recording projects. The next request is off-highway vehicle enforcement, and this is through the Public Works Department, and it is increasing their budget from $35,000 to $50,000, and that would be to add one more U.S. Forest Service employee to be able to provide this enforcement. Then the South Side facility that we purchased just recently, there's a request for $40,000 for some small remodel projects. And these were necessary just to get it ready to move in, set up the different meeting rooms at the right sizes, and the card access and all of the different parts to make that building ready. Open Space and Trails requests, Emma Open Space Agricultural Structure. The request was to increase the budget by $20,000, so going from $130,000 to $150,000. And then the Lazy Glen Barn, they're doing some renovation work and need to bring parts of this up to code, up to the fire code, and this is a request for $39,000. The Sopris Creek Rio Grande Trail, this is a joint project with Open Space and RAFTA and for this bridge. And the county had already set aside $127,000 for the bridge project. They're just increasing that by about $35,000. And so the total amount that the Open Space and Trails program would contribute to the project is $162,417. And again, that's a joint project with RAFTA. Another bridge project is the Wingo Rio Grande Trail Bridge decking maintenance. And they plan to be replacing all of the timber on the bridge. And that's for a total cost of about $159,000. Then an airport request, and this is for the aircraft ramp rehabilitation, a lot of damage to that area and bringing it up to FAA standards. And then also the general aviation parking lot paving. The total amount for this is $1,500,000. And then at the Solid Waste Center, their operational and maintenance building, $6 million had already been budgeted for this building, but they had not included in that the cost of permitting. And so there's a request for $220,000 for permitting, and then an additional $584,000 for energy efficiency measures for the building. And of that $584,000, they're expecting that a core grant will be able to cover about $200,000 of that. Also at the Solid Waste Center, a water production well, and the request is for $185,000. And the last request is the courthouse renovation. And as you remember, we had budgeted just a placeholder in the budget, not knowing the full scope of the project and not having complete design. But now that there's the 50% construction documents done, the full scope of the project, with some additional work for security, accessibility, and court improvements, this request is to increase our placeholder budget by $1,778,000. Part of that will be coming from the general fund balance, just a little over $1 million. We are anticipating that we will receive a court security grant and also a core grant that will help to offset these costs by $250,000. So all of these requests put together increase Picken County's expenditure budget by $5,673,012. That's offset by increased revenues of $1,571,250 for a net increase of $4,101,762. Any questions on these?
Any questions,
I
Patty?
just have a comment. I want to thank you again. I really appreciate it when we put these all together, so we're not hearing these sporadically throughout the year. We do it quarterly, I believe. It just gives, I think, a better picture of the budget changes, so I appreciate the time. And I did watch the meeting last night, the meeting that I missed, so I'm really familiar with your presentation for first read, so thank you.
Okay, this is a public hearing. Are there any members of the audience who would like to comment on these budget requests? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to leave the public hearing open for our next item because that's what the audience is here for, I think. And I would entertain a motion to approve this resolution on our second reading.
Move to approve?
A second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further comment? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Connie. We appreciate your thoroughness in this. Okay. Does the board want a short break, or should we just
I think we
keep
just
going?
keep going.
This is a fairly short meeting today, so
Well, we'll see.
Okay.
Rise to the charge.
we'll move on to, we have a group of 3 ordinances, all which have to do with the Aspen Chapel. And I think if we can kind of talk about all of them at the same time, and then we'll have to approve the different, or vote on the different ordinances separately, but.
Yeah, I think that makes that makes sense, Steve. As you
Right?
mentioned, we have 3 different actions in front of the board today. The first is an ordinance accepting a quitclaim deed from the Aspen Chapel. The second is an ordinance granting a quitclaim deed to the chapel. And the third is a ordinance that is accepting a restrictive covenant from the Aspen Chapel. I have 2 representatives of the chapel here with me, Mr. David Scruggs and Sarah Oates. She is representing them as an attorney. I'm going to pull up a map here real quick, and while I do that, if I can find out how to do that, we can start moving on this stuff. Anyway, what we really have here, and I know Commissioner Clapper wasn't here to discuss this last time, but we have what is essentially a land swap between Pitkin County and the Aspen Chapel. This has been in the works for quite some time. I know GR was here last time to fill us in on some of the details, as was John Peacock, and I'll do my best to answer some of these questions.
I can let you know, right? I did watch the meeting last
Okay.
night, and I also was involved in this, what was it, 20 years ago? So I could have, I could have done the history for GR and for John
Yeah,
Peacock,
exactly.
so.
All right. Well, let me pull up this map because I think it is helpful for members of the public that are here to
appreciate that.
discuss this. I think everybody's familiar with the location of the chapel property. And here is a depiction of it. This portion of the property up here points towards the roundabout. Here's Maroon Creek Road coming up here, and here's Castle Creek Road right here. The first item on the agenda here is an ordinance accepting a quitclaim deed from the Aspen Chapel. That is for the portion of the property that the chapel would like the county, would like to grant to the county, which is right here, labeled as parcel 1, and a portion right here, which is parcel 4. Parcel 4 would essentially become part of the right-of-way for what's Meadowwood Road that runs right through here. Well, actually, you can see it better on this one. And parcel 1 is necessary to facilitate proposed Nordic and walking trail through this portion onto open space and Picken County property that's being managed by Open Space and Trails. The grant to the church would be for this parcel right here, which is labeled parcel 2, which essentially encompasses a portion of what is the upper lot that is currently being managed by Open Space and Trails, and a little bit more of the property to the north, where I believe there's a proposed chapel residence potentially going to take place. The last item is a restrictive covenant that the church has agreed to grant to the county as partial consideration for the land exchange here. The restrictive covenant includes things like limitations on height, and it's essentially related to expanding the lower portion of the church, the existing chapel, and also building a chapel residence on the property. We've made some changes to the restrictive covenant from the one that was in your packet, but those changes were essentially to remove the reference to the trail easement that when we did first reading we thought may be necessary but is no longer necessary. I'm going to give the board a chance to ask me any questions, and then I'll give Mr. Scruggs and Sarah an opportunity to chime in. I will also add there was a discussion last week, 2 weeks ago, about the necessary development approvals for the chapel in connection with this property. I believe the chapel today is going to request that you all waive the requirement that they go through site plan and activity envelope review in connection with the development of the property, and they can tell you why they feel like that's appropriate, and then I can weigh in on a little bit on that for you.
Good, thanks.
So I'm David Scruggs, and I'm here representing the Board of Directors. We also have some members of the chapel community here. I think that perhaps the chapel community thought lawyers' faces weren't the best spiritual faces to interface with you, so we brought some more spiritual people. And Greg Anderson is our chaplain emeritus. He was the chaplain for over 35 years. He's actually the only person that was around when this problem occurred. And then also we have Laurel Cato and Stephen Knipe, and both of them are heading up our effort to build a chapel residence. And then we have Don Davidson, who is a member of the board and has been the treasurer twice. And then Barbara Owen, who was chairman of the board for a long, long time. And all of them are here on behalf of the chapel also. And then, of course, Sarah Oates is our attorney. I just want to kind of set the table. I was here 2 weeks ago, and I always like to acknowledge the service commissioners and other public officials' discharge, and I know it takes a lot of time, preparation, a lot of patience, and we appreciate you serving. The chapel is going to be 50 years old this year, and so we're obviously, when I turned 50, I kind of re-examined our situation. We're looking 50 years ahead, and what we think we are a community asset, and we also think our building is a icon at the doorstep of Aspen. And all of y'all are familiar with Pepke's idea of body, mind, and spirit. We try to fulfill the spiritual aspect of Aspen. And if you go back to the period of time when we were founded, 68, some of you will recall that Martin Luther King was assassinated and Bobby Kennedy was assassinated, and the Vietnam War was roaring, and we had a Democratic National Convention that turned into a riot. And there were some far-sighted people here who kind of responded to that and set the mission of the chapel. And I just wanted to tell you real quickly, it's a symbol of togetherness and peace for all mankind. That's why we have a dove on top. And it's a place for residents and travelers to come worship, have spiritual renewal, inspiration, study, and meditation. And we do all of those things. Everyone's welcome at the chapel. We have both a Christian community and a Jewish community. We have other religions come there, Buddhists, Native Americans. We also have the spiritual aspects of yoga and meditation, and we have community forums, and we have outreach programs, and we have music programs, and we have a gallery for artists, local artists, to display their wares. And we also support the veterans through their Vets for Huts, Huts for Vets. And we also, last year, were the homeless shelter while the Catholic Church was being redone. We're also sponsoring a forum, I believe, that Pitkin County is participating in about the homeless issue and how to address it. So I just wanted to lay that predicate to you. What actually happened is 35 years ago, Wisely Meadowbrook Drive was laid out, and it took a piece of our property. It's not the county's fault. It's not our fault. It's just we just didn't get it done. But I was tasked with the job 3 years ago. I've been working with John Peacock for 3 years on this, and I texted him this morning and says, everything going okay? And he said, yeah, I think we're there. I think this is a long journey is coming to an end, so I hope so. And with that, I'll let Sarah address any other issues that you might have.
As Rye had mentioned, we do want to ask that the requirement that we do site plan and activity envelope be waived, and there's a couple reasons for this. If you recall from the last meeting, the discussion that we had was that there were specific reasons that we entered into the covenant, and there were concerns that when we first started talking to the BOCC in the last couple of years, had stated they wanted addressed with this property as part of the land swap. One was the view from the west, and that has been addressed with a height restriction for any addition to the meeting space by restricting any new addition to the eave of the roof. The other concern was the parking, and as pursuant to the covenant, we have to maintain our parking spaces with the exception of maybe 2 to 3 to accommodate trash and wildlife safe trash containers. The other concern was the Nordic Trail, and as Rye has pointed out, we've done the land swap to be able to accommodate that. And then there was this question of chapel residents, and that's addressed in the covenant as well. The other thing with respect to site planning and activity envelope that I wanted to discuss is if you look at the property, once it's reconfigured, there's really not a lot of places where a chapel residence could go because of the covenant. We have to maintain the parking spaces, so that knocks out any of the 2 shadowed areas that are shown. We have obviously the most logical place, and I'm sure all of you have been in the building, to expand the meeting space is on that west side, just because the meeting space, we'd come out at grade where the existing meeting space is. So that really just leaves us with that small portion that we're acquiring from the county on the north side. With respect to doing it right off of Meadowwood, there's a beautiful community garden. There's a garden there for the church, and it's used as an entrance and for various activities that occur at the church. So that's just really probably not a location where a chapel residence would go. So, really this project is already sort of cooked in a lot of ways because we know what we're limited to in the restrictive covenant. And we're willing to share the plans along the way with the BOCC in whatever manner you would be comfortable with, certainly. And then the last thing I want to say about activity envelope and site plan review, it's really a question for the county of where development's going to go. Are there view plane issues? Is the parking going to be addressed? And again, all of this has already been addressed in the covenant, and so that's the reason why we're requesting the waiver. Additionally, as part of the waiver, there's some acknowledgement that we are a religious institution and fall under the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, and by expanding the meeting space and the chapel residence, the Aspen Chapel is exercising their religious what is it?
Religious exercise.
Religious exercise, religious practices, so.
The only thing I would add to that is I just wanted to address to you what we really are planning to do. As Sarah said, we're going to share all of our plans with the county. We're presently doing that. We've already interfaced with Cindy Hubin concerning the actually where we may put the resident and what would be best. And we will share those plans. But let me tell you what our problem is, and you know the problem. The problem is housing. We have our present spiritual leader, Nicholas Vesey, and his family, wife, 2 kids, have been here 5 times. They've moved 6 times. They've been here 5 years, moved 6 times. That gets old, and it's very difficult. Plus, the chapel has paid $60,000 a year in rent. And so at the end of this year, we will pay $360,000 in rent. Well, we think we can finance a nice chapel resident and solve the problem in the future when we have the next spiritual leader. The other thing we plan to do is to retrofit the chapel. I mean, the chapel's 50 years old, and it needs a new roof. It is not ADA compliant. We want it to be ADA compliant. The lighting is 50 years old. We need to upgrade our lighting. Our stained glass windows, which are just absolutely spectacular, and I invite y'all to come see them, they're needing sealing and some repair work. And then also 50-year-old kitchen and 50-year-old bathrooms need to be redone. So that's really what we're doing, and we're doing that to better serve the community. So I really would appreciate you accepting our request.
George?
Oh, thank you. So, Rye, as Sarah said, that all of these concerns that would normally come up in a site review are already conditioned in the covenant. So you've discussed this with ComDev, and you guys, staff is comfortable with this?
Yeah, George, I have discussed it with Cindy, and she was going to try and make it here today. I know she's
Right behind you.
Just showed up.
Come on up, Cindy. I know that Cindy's been working with the design committee for the chapel, and we did have a conversation this morning. I think, and I'll let Cindy weigh in on this, but primarily activity envelope review is focused on avoiding constrained sites on any given property in the county. In this case, as Mr. Scruggs mentioned and as Sarah mentioned, there's really a limited location that they could put the chapel residents on the property. And my understanding, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, is that's generally right in this location here. That would not generally fall under a constrained site under activity envelope review. So I think at least with respect to that aspect of the review, that is adequately addressed here. Also, site plan review, again, generally that is looking at visual impacts, making sure that the lighting and color of the building comply with the land use code and things like that. And the height is a big part of site plan review. That has been addressed in the statute here, or I'm sorry, in the covenant here. Cindy, do you want to add anything else on that? My understanding is community development is okay with this request, but I don't want to speak on behalf of Cindy, so.
You know, it's an unusual circumstance if I say don't go through the land use code, but I want to caveat it with, if I do go to church, I go to the chapel, by the way. That's my caveat here. But I do want to say that I think that the chapel and the team that's addressing this issue know the issues, and I have been working with them. To me, it's more of the visual concern from your approach coming out of Aspen and looking towards that hillside. But I believe that they have addressed and will address the concerns from the visual perspective. And I also believe that, they're working hard to try to be as energy efficient as possible, and I don't believe it's going to be a large structure. So I think that a lot of our concerns are addressed already, and if you feel confident in me working with them in that regard, and you might want to say that, hey, if I'm not satisfied, we'll loop back to you or something like that. It's an unusual circumstance, but I feel confident that we can get there. thing that I was thinking about is they may rather have the covenant than have to have my approval. But
Thank you.
I just have a comment. You mentioned, just to disclose, you mentioned the dove. I was on planning and zoning when we approved the dove. We spent hours on that bird. Which way should it face, how the wings should be tilted, how it should be lit or not lit. So every time I go by there, that dove is very special to me, especially when the red-tailed hawk is sitting on top of it.
You know, it's
So,
like
yeah.
the lion lays down with the lamb, you know.
Yeah, it's a beautiful facility, and I too am hoping that we can put this to rest here today, and I appreciate Cindy's efforts, and I'm comfortable with waiving the site plan review issues. I have faith in a lot of things, and I have faith in Cindy to make sure that the right decisions are made.
Kelly?
Thank you. Patty, since you weren't here before, I did just say during first reading that I'm a member of the chapel
I
and have
watched
made
the video. I watched
donations to them and requested the attorney's input as to whether I should recuse, and they said there was that was
I think
not
you're good.
necessary on this. So just wanted to let you know. And I don't have any concerns with the current request.
So my question would be, I guess, to Rye and Cindy, dealing with waiving of the site plan requirements. Would we need to write that into the covenant to allow that? Does our land use code allow us to waive those requirements?
Yeah, that's a two-part question. One, yes, the land use code does allow the Board of County Commissioners to waive the site plan and activity review requirement, and that's one of the reasons that I wanted to bring it to you to talk about that. The other thing is the current version that Sarah and I have exchanged includes both a version that includes a requirement for activity envelope and site plan review and one that does not. The one that does not still requires them to come in for building permits and things like that. And some of the things Mr. Scruggs is talking about, like updating bathrooms and kitchens and things like that, that falls squarely in the building department world. And the residence itself would need to be signed off by building, of course, to make sure it's safe and all that kind of stuff. So that is addressed in the covenant.
So then would we need to amend our ordinance to allow this change?
I don't think you'll need to amend the ordinance. I think I would just propose that you adopt the restrictive covenant as amended to remove the requirement for activity envelope and site plan review.
Okay, okay. And a question about the chapel, where the meeting room would be expanded in the direction of the parking lots. I presume it's not taking away parking spaces, but I'm trying to envision how far it would come out. Would it somehow, would it constrain the parking area at all?
Commissioner, actually, it would probably, more than likely, the expansion would be right in that area.
So on the west side of the chapel.
On the west side?
Yeah, so that we would not impact on the parking. If we did, we'd have to, provide the parking we're guaranteeing under the restrictive covenant.
Okay, so
that's
it's going the other direction. And then would that kind of be underground to some extent, or?
Actually, there is a slope there, and that's
Or
probably why it would be easier.
It would be open with natural light because of the slope going down there?
Absolutely. So we think that would be an advantage too.
Okay, okay. And,
And also I would say that the first priority is the residents. The second priority is retrofitting. And we're probably out of money then. The last thing is if we ever did expand our meeting.
okay.
And that would run off of the existing basement area that's our gallery. And as you say, it's sloping down there, so we could go out there.
And then I ask this out of curiosity because I do spend a lot of time at the chapel down in the meeting room, and it seems like there's a lot of activities going on there. Now, would you be adding a second meeting room so you could have two activities at the same time? Would that be the intention of expanding the meeting area?
We're getting ahead of ourselves because we did have to get our land, but I'll just give you my thoughts. And Actually where the offices are now, that area is a pretty nice area to make into another meeting room. And it's more accessible because you just come straight in. And then maybe we could put our offices down where we're just talking about.
Okay.
So, but, you know, we're just in the discussion stage, and then we have to do the fundraising, and that's the lowest of the three priorities.
No, the reason I'm trying to just visualize it is, you know, if we're waiving the site plan thing, I want to be able to sort of envision what it's going to look like. And I mean, I can see that it would be done very thoughtfully and would be a logical extension of the space you're using there.
Right. And right now, there's a utility room there, and the Jewish community has some offices there, so we'd probably reconfigure all of that.
Okay. Kelly?
Sorry, I just had thinking of a question. If there was any tree removal along that side, would that be something that falls under building?
I don't think it would fall under building, but I believe it would fall under the land use code.
So would that then, would any requirement to replace those be excluded if we're not having site plan review here?
That's a good point.
And
I don't think so.
I don't think of any caliper trees there that would come under our, I haven't really looked at every tree, but I think it's more brush.
Yeah, what I was going to point out is where we're proposing the residence, there's actually a burn there, and then it drops off precipitously, and it's open space. It's open land. And then on the drop-off side on the west, that's brush. There's no trees. Actually, you know, there's the picture of the chapel was first built, and you can see.
Like most of this area, there was fewer trees.
So I don't, you know, I mean, I'm a tree hugger, and I'd be very concerned, but there's not, you know, there's not much around there. There are the main trees are delineating the parking lots that are between those parking lots.
Between and along the Castle Creek.
Okay. So, board, are there any more questions for the applicant or the staff at this point?
No, I think it's time for public comment.
So, this is a public hearing. Are there any members of the audience who would like to make comments? And this is your opportunity to speak to the issue.
I think they see where we're going.
Okay, I don't see anybody rising to the occasion, so I will close the public hearing. I think they're all here for moral support to the effort.
They're the spiritual face.
Non-lawyer faces.
Okay.
I will make a motion, one at a time, to first of all approve an ordinance accepting a quitclaim deed from the Aspen Chapel.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to approve accepting the quitclaim deed from the Aspen Chapel. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Now I will do a motion to accept an ordinance granting a quitclaim deed to the Aspen Chapel from the Board of County Commissioners.
Second?
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 And 3, to put this to rest. Hopefully, right? I will make a motion to approve an ordinance accepting a restrictive covenant from the Aspen Chapel, and I would like to amend that covenant to address the waiving of the site plan review.
Got it.
And activity envelope review.
Well, yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and you
I'll
second?
second, yep.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And I will, or comments. I want to make comments. This issue goes back so long that I believe my dad was on the Board of County Commissioners when they were trying to figure this out years ago, and Greg is shaking his head yes. And I am sorry that it has taken so long to get it resolved, but you know, I think it was probably through the effort of David Scruggs and John Peacock being able to sit down and and figure out how to make it work, that we made progress this time and we can finally reach closure on this item. So I'm really pleased that, we're to this point and can, it's like a historic moment really in the history of the chapel. So it's 50-year-old history right now, and this will take it far into the future. So I'm really pleased about this.
Just make sure that dove stays there.
I promise.
I like that bird up there.
I will say that John was very, very helpful and helped move this along, and really appreciate it. He's not here to hear the compliment, but I'm sure he's listening.
Yeah.
He keeps an eye on us, trust me.
Can I make one comment?
So,
If you want to come forward and give your name for the record. Oh, he closed the public hearing, but
yeah, we closed the public hearing.
sure.
So any further comments? I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I also wanted to invite you, each of you commissioners, to come to our 50th year events. And so I've got a brochure here about the chapel, about the stained glass, about the architecture and the events coming up. And take a look at them, and you're welcome to come visit
I have a
us.
beautiful
Thank you.
watercolor painting. I'll have to take a picture of it and send it to you. It was a gift to me many years ago.
So I would actually, this might be a little out of order, but Greg Anderson, I would invite you if you have any comments you want to make after the fact at this point. Yeah,
No, I was just telling Cindy that after what you said, that I
come up to the microphone.
I've always felt bad that it all started when Pat Doby, I guess county engineer, came to us with this new road. I thought, that's win-win. We need a little more parking. And somehow I just said, I worked with our trustees, but to say, go ahead, and we'll do the exchange. And I guess I always personally felt bad that I probably should have said, no, we need to do the exchange first. And then after it was done, I was after Pat for 2 or 3 years. It just never happened. And so that's the origin of the problem. And I felt bad on my part that I let that happen. But I trusted that it would all take place, and it's only been 40 years later.
So you had
But I'm grateful that it's happening.
You had to retire in order to get it done.
Yeah, and we've all lived very well with it, I've often thought of charging a toll to the people in Meadowood, but we didn't.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for finally doing this. This is great.
You bet.
Thank you, everybody. I can let it go. I'm exonerated.
Okay.
So moving on, open discussion. Phyllis, do we have any open discussion items?
I have 2 items. One is just an announcement of Brush Creek Ride Improvement Open House that's happening on, I'm looking for the date.
Brush Creek, what improvement?
April 10th.
Thank you. April 10th from 5 to 7:30. So that's just for your information. And what's being announced from the Federal Highway Commission and the Federal Lands Highway Division on that open house. And it has to do with the improvements that are being planned for the Brush Creek Park and Ride. Another one, Tuesday, April 2nd. Currently, we have Commissioner Child and Poshman not attending that meeting. I understand, George, you have a potential conflict too?
I'll let staff know Monday.
So we're looking at, should we cancel that meeting? Because if you're not attending and you're not going to know until Monday, we wouldn't have a quorum.
We have one item on that agenda, though, that says do not move. Special guests being, it's for the ambulance barn solar panels.
Right, and we're working with Rich to find out if that's a problem or not. There's also a well aging plan update from Senior Services. There's legislative update, dynamic message sign, Highway 82 sign update.
Yeah, I mean, I told John yesterday that I would let him know on Monday, and
He thought,
we can deal with it on Monday.
he
So
thought
I
that
wouldn't cancel, just,
Kelly and I could carry on and change the world without the guys here.
Except for that little quorum issue.
Anyway,
Okay, so we'll leave it on the calendar and see where we go from there. Just at least so everyone knows now.
yeah,
Have you tried
Or-
card already?
Kelly and
yeah, it's too early.
Patty know
I'll
now.
still plan to be here until you tell me
Okay.
Yeah,
otherwise.
I will be here either, and if there's no meeting, Kelly and I can probably go do some work for the city election.
Okay, it's a plan. Thank you. That's all I have.
So I think I want to give a little more details for the public benefit on the open house about the Brush Creek Park and Ride. So this is a public meeting where the public can go to find out more information about what is planned for improvements at the Park and Ride. And the meeting is Wednesday, April 10th from 5 to 7:30 p.m. It's in the Art Gallery at CMC on the Aspen campus. So if anyone's interested, then they can go and find out more about it there.
And if there's 3 commissioners that plan to attend, we should notice that meeting too.
Okay,
unlikely
and
to
that
attend?
is
Or unlikely?
one of our regular meeting days. Yeah, I might possibly attend. Do other commissioners think you might also
I will
attend?
not be attending.
I have a conflict.
Since Greg lives right there, he might be want to go.
Perhaps we should just notice it to be safe.
We could just notice it and then
Okay.
we'd be safe either way.
Yep, we will notice.
Okay. Any open discussion items from the commissioners? So I will entertain a motion to adjourn this regular meeting.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye?
All right, everybody have a great weekend.
Yep.
I'm on my way to Gypsum tomorrow.
Costco?
Yes, ma'am. You need something? I'm going Saturday. We need to start planning our trip.